I'll bet I'm not the only person around here who has spent part of their life feeling very, very out of place. Like the conditions you were born into, your family, the culture your family's in, all of that, just somehow didn't suit you. I spent my childhood basically wandering around in a fog, trying this and that to try to fit in. And it only worked marginally. But every once in a while in that fog, somehow a message would come through, an intuitive message that would tell you something about yourself that you need to know. The first one of these was when I was in high school and I got introduced to the idea of astrology. So I started looking into astrology in high school. When I got to college, it was at that time that I found other people who also didn't fit in. Ironically enough, most of them were in the drama community. And we sat together and talked and had a wide range of discussions and never once went to a football game. But what we did was we talked about things like astrology and Carl Jung. And so I became extremely interested in Jung. I felt that anybody who could say spiritual experiences aren't necessarily a sign of something being wrong with you. You know, I said, finally somebody who could say this and say there's value to spiritual experiences. And he also used astrology too, by the way. In some of his tougher cases, where he would actually go and cast a chart to be able to try to figure out what's going on with a person. Another thing, probably one of the most important things that happened in college, was I had my first angel experience. And it was one of those things. I had been trying, not often, but I tried a series of psychedelic experiences. Drugs, yes, so we know. But the final one, and was the hardest one to deal with. I was very paranoid, very anxious. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, in the back of my head, I heard this calm, quiet, supremely authoritative voice say, "I'll protect you this time, but don't ever do this again." And you can bet that I followed that advice. But that took me through college. We're into astrology. Then I kind of went off the path and ended up working in a packing house. I needed money for 5 years. When I moved out here, a couple of years after I moved out here, I ran into the Queen of Heaven Gnostic Church, 1982, and I've been a member ever since. A few years later, I ran into a group of people who were interested in ceremonial magic, and that really got me going. And so that was a group that eventually became the Hermetic Fellowship, which is a legitimate church. It doesn't use the word church's name, but just the fellowship. It only puts on one thing a month. It has a event which is only Zoom right at the moment, but called Hermetic Society, and various people talk about various topics at Hermetic Society. Some of them you guys might be interested in, and just check in with us about maybe getting your name on the mailing list. And so I want to start talking to you about scrying, because it's a practice that allows you to commune with and make contact with energies and superior intelligences that can really help your life. There's an old saying that a practice without a theory is dangerous, and a theory without a practice is useless. Given that, let's look at a theory, how we can communicate with the spirit world. You communicate with the spirit world through vision. That is an image that appears in your head. This is accompanied by words you hear most of the time. Along with this, there is a feeling state appropriate to the energy you're trying to connect with. Some people only get but one of those particular senses showing up at one time, but 3 is the gold standard. As long as there have been people, some have recognized that there was a reality which was outside the confines of their physical existence, a whole dynamic energy system, existing outside of that which we see with our physical senses. This realm, when reached, can give us access to wisdom and guidance beyond what is provided by the culture we are born into. We often call this a spirit realm. In my present understanding, which is always subject to change, I don't want to be trapped in saying when I find a better way of looking at things. I describe it as density. Why density? To give you an analogy, you can see and feel the room you're in and all of its furnishings. However, the room also has air. You can't see air, even though you experience its effects. The difference is that air is less dense than things like the floor under your feet. The realm of spirit, although even more subtle, is much the same. You can experience it through finding ways to connect with an intermediary zone where you and it can find an area where your conscious mind and spiritual consciousness can interact. The Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah gives us a graphic way to understand this. Slide, please. Okay. This gives you this is a big, dense thing right here, but what's important right now is showing you areas of overlap. The one theory about why you communicate the spirit world, if you take these three circles, the three big circles, the bottom one basically relates to your physical body and the you know yourself to be. The middle one relates to the spirit world, and the top one relates to the higher spiritual world, the angelic world, the higher spiritual world that informs them, and they can inform you because this area called a vasika, that you can see here, it kind of is little, looks like could be seen as a fish or something, coming in back there, and it can show you basically a place that if you can get to that place, it can get to that place and you can interact. So it gives you at least a way of potentially looking at how to get to the spirit world. And we'll talk about specific methods here in a little bit.
Make sure to stand by the microphone.
What's that now?
Make sure to stand by the microphone as much as you can.
Okay, sure. Anyway, I hope that was all understandable.
Hold the mic closer.
Okay. Okay, then this over from the Cape. Of course, it took a lot of experimenting to find the most effective methods of maximizing the interactions in the Vasika zone, and certain types of procedures have been used more often than others. I'm going to talk about a few of the better known ones that have been used successfully by numerous people. There are numerous right ways to do this, and it takes experimentation to find out what works best for you. We will look at a few techniques of what is called skrying. Skrying is an Old English word that simply means seeing. There are numerous ways to do this. I'm going to look first at John Dee and Edward Kelly from the 1580s, and a more modern experimenter named Nigel Clow, and another one from the 1400s named Trithemius of Spanhiem. Finally, in this section, I will show you a couple of pictures of one of my own personal practices based around an interaction with an angel from tradition called Uriel. Very possibly the first human experience of skrying was one quiet night, looking into a pool of water and having a strong, unexpected image pop into your mind. Skrying takes a whole lot of forms. In our culture, we have Disney's mirror, mirror on the wall. However, most mirrors from tradition aren't even reflective, but just simply provide a space to focus an inner image. One of the best known examples in occult circles is the sort of thing is that from Elizabethan mage Dr. John Dee, he felt he wasn't capable of skrying, and so looked for someone who was. After a few non-starters, in 1582 he connected with Edward Kelly, who really had talent. In that time period, this was a frequent pattern, that of looking for someone else to do the work. Dee acted as a scribe for all the many years they worked together. The content was all Kelly. They used an obsidian mirror that was brought back from Mexico at about 1520. There's a lot of stories about that mirror, where it came from. Some people thought Sir Walter Raleigh brought it back. Well, Sir Walter Raleigh was actually one of Dee's neighbors. Their kids played together. But no, the mirror was actually in England before Raleigh took off. Although he helped Raleigh a lot when he helped him design mathematical formulas to help him figure out a way to get around the world. The mirror still resides in the British Museum. It was taken out last year and had its mineral content analyzed. They were able to determine where in Mexico it was mined. The Enochian material received by Kelly stands by itself in the depths of the material. It includes an alphabet, tablets from which to derive angel names, calls to use when summoning them, and much, much more. The material was hidden in a secret drawer in a chest, which at one point actually went through the fire of London. In the mysterious ways these things work their way through history, we have enough of them to at least reconstruct an original system. Also, some of them were actually dug up in Dee's yard after he had passed by somebody looking for anything that they might be able to find. But it's really interesting. There's a kind of there's a pattern. Anything that's really, really valuable and comes from the old ways and are left for us, when they get discovered, the first people to discover them don't value them. There's a legend that the person who found some of them actually used them to drain meat pies through. It's kind of like the Gnostic material is found in the Nag Hammadi in Egypt, and they ended up basically starting fires with some of them. So we didn't get all those either as well, but there was this kind of pattern. When somebody finally figures out, hey, we could make some money off of this, well, then everything changes. This whole piece of history could be a basis for many lectures, so I will go on. As students of the Western Esoteric Tradition, the angel entities that appeared often claimed to be angels whose names we are familiar with. Uriel is a major one, but also unique ones in the Enochian system, like one is called Medimi, who took the form of a young female. Picture, please. There we go. It's a little hard to see here, but this is made from obsidian. It came from Aztec sources, and this makes this picture particularly poignant. Most of the mirrors that are floating around these days don't have a reflective surface. This one, you can see her face actually in the surface if you look closely. And next slide, please. This is one of the Enochian tablets. This is one of the things that the angels gave to Dee and Kelly. They gave the letters to what the letters were to Kelly, and Dee wrote them down. And there are incredible numbers. There's hundreds of angel names that can derive from various patterns that are on just this one tablet alone. But this is in English. One of the other things they got with that was they got a complete alphabet, and someday I may actually get a set of tablets made that have that alphabet on it. But for right now, I'm just happy to have these. So anyway, another modern advocate of scrying is a gentleman called Nigel Clow. His little book, Magic Mirrors, is a very how-to guide on the making and using of magic mirrors. He has mirrors made out of plaster of Paris, all the way to ones made out of cardboard. The face of the mirror is a non-reflective black coating that the surface has been treated with what he refers to as a fluid accumulator. He recommends gold in solution as also plants that are associated with the element you're trying to get a vision of. Although he briefly mentions the planets, most of his emphasis is on the elements. Although his book is only 64 pages long, it tells you how to prepare yourself for scrying, how to accomplish all the way up to astral projection. If you want a copy, being out of print, you're likely to pay $100 or more. Luckily, there's a complete copy online. Nowhere in his book does he talk about angels. Angels are at the core of what I do. As a representative of the Western Esoteric Tradition, the astral realm is filled with angels associated with the physical elements, the 4 elements of the physical world, using that particular scheme, the planets, the zodiacal signs, and of course, the Kabbalistic tree of life. The elements of this approach are pattern-based. Known patterns are the 12 zodiacal signs, 7 traditional planets, and 4 elements that make up the physical realm we know a lot about. What this allows us to do is develop a system of correspondences that give us symbols we can use to give ourselves some idea if we have the right angel. Color attributions are one way to start. Mars, with his very active, aggressive approach to things, is, in this setup, red. This makes intuitive sense and adds to a gut-level understanding of Mars and its energy. Venus, on the other hand, with its smoother, more harmonious energy, is associated with green. So if you're calling on an angel of Mars and the image you see is wearing a green robe, you know you don't have what you're looking for. All this is context from the Western Esoteric Tradition. If you are using for your vision a process that comes from a South American native shamanic tradition, you might be using animal powers as your symbolic context. So, whatever your need is, there's an angel for you. Next slide, please. As here, when I was first reading Cloud's book years and years ago, I made this. You can't see it with a looking face on, but it's basically it's a wooden bowl that's solid wood, but it's curved on the inside like he recommends things being. And I'm not sure what I put in it, but because it's been a long time ago, but it's an example of the sort of thing you might do if Cloud were an influence on you and you read his book and wanted to try it. I honestly never got around to trying this particular thing because I just, got inspired and something else inspired me away to another direction after that. So, but that gives you an idea of the sort of thing you can do and stash it away. I mean, Dee's mirror is like 7 inches across, so it's kind of, so it could be carried quite easily if someone were going places. Like he himself left England after his place in the court was much reduced, and went to Europe and went to various courts of various other kings and tried to sell what he was doing to them, and he took his mirror along, of course, too. All right, the next thing, our next one, this is a little bit older, this guy here, Trithemius of Spanhiem. In 1801, a book was published in London called the Magus. It was for its time a pretty comprehensive look at the elements of ceremonial magic and compiled by a man called Francis Barrett. One of the sections of the book was by Trithemius of Spanhiem. That section was called On the Art of Directing Spirits into Crystal. This was a complete system that used a clear round crystal set in a gold surround and surrounded itself by a wood structure with symbols on it and a stand. There is in this setup also a separate stand for the ever popular incense. All this within a magic circle marked out on the floor. The operator sits in front of the stand and with the intention of calling forth a specific, a particular significant spiritual entity. And he gives precise instructions on the wordings to use for this too. And he was in the 1400s, by the way. Trithemius was kind of a genius. he was really into cryptology. As a matter of fact, they think that one of the things that Dee did was he actually had Trithemius' book on crypts and ciphers, and was able to use it in communicating with certain people, in his time. And I've even heard that the CIA at one point was using some inspiration from him to give themselves a way of coding what they were sending out. The operator started to stand. Okay, the small but comprehensive book has a detailed instruction on how to prepare yourself for contact. It includes specific words of introduction and everything you will need to call forth the spirit of your choice. Next slide, please. There's one. There's this guy, his name, he calls himself Frater Ashen Hassan, and he's seriously into Trithemius. And he followed every little detail to the max. He's a traditionalist magician, so he's one of the people who feels that everything was done back then is somehow more powerful, I guess, than the things we do now. But that shows you the full setup that he was using, and somebody would be sitting back in a chair back there and doing the invocation and staring at the crystal. Okay, Frater Hassan's approach is again to have a separate scryer. In Dee and Kelly-ish fashion, he acts as a scribe. The results of these contacts are retold in a large book called Gateways Through Light and Shadow, published by Azoth Press. Whenever I am doing a spirit contact with one of the same angels explored in this book, I look at his results. My results have been quite different from theirs, but that shouldn't surprise anyone. The angels give you individually what you need in a way you can understand. This is what separates the results of this practice from the traditional prophet types who think their messages are for everybody. Frater Hassan is a traditionalist magician. That means he sticks to what the old books say to the letter. My approach in general is quite different. There is a saying attributed to an unnamed rabbi: tradition is what God gives you. What you do with it is what you give God. For me, tradition is a place to start. In order for something to have life, it has to evolve. And I feel that change is imperative. And I mean, our biological bodies grow up. Why shouldn't practices change and evolve to better suit the needs of people working them? The angels sometimes suggest, to me, the angels sometimes suggest new practices, but often advise me on small and significant changes to the practices I'm evolving. These changes help me to change and make these efforts more effective. Another different type of scrying is called the psychomantium. This was developed by a Dr. Raymond Moody. I think he was associated with the University of North Carolina, who was looking for a method to help people deal with grief. His inspiration was a practice done in ancient Greece where people would go into a cave to get a vision of the person who had passed on. What he came up with was taking a small room about the size of a walk-in closet. The walls were lined with black fabric. There was a mirror, but it was tilted in such a way as it did not reflect the image of the person sitting therein. There was also one small lighter candle. The environment for some people evokes an image of their ancestors who will communicate with them. Moody himself reports seeing a grandmother who told him some family secrets only she could have known. Another interesting phenomena is that often people appear as they did when they were at their best, not with the ravages of age. One of the groups I am associated with, that we've mentioned previously, was the Hermetic Fellowship. A few years ago, and which puts on a monthly talk called Hermetic Society. In pre-COVID days, they would put on a once-a-year special called the Divination Party. This brought together multiple types of divination. For a couple of years, they put a psychomantium in. So I've experienced this device. My results were pretty minimal because of time pressure. I wanted to leave time so others could have a chance to experience it also. In an ideal world, you would start to meditate on what you wanted. The day of the divination, you would set aside an hour to an hour and a half for the contact. You can't rush scrying and get good results. Even after all these years, it can sometimes take me 5 minutes or more after an invocation to get a communication flowing. A scrying procedure that I have been using for the last couple of years involves one of the archangels mentioned in Dee and Kelly's contacts, Uriel. The Western angel tradition often associates this angel as the archangel of elemental earth. Archangels are the top angels of any specific group of spirits. So, there are symbols on the altar that connect with the earth. When you see my pictures here, I'll show you pictures of what I'm doing with this. The large, solid rock chalice, the truncated pyramid, and although the Bible doesn't give names, Uriel is known in some circles as being one of the angels with the flaming sword that guards the Garden of Eden. Slide, please. There it is. Okay, you can see the flaming sword up there on top. The symbol, the truncated pyramid is, again, a symbol of the four elements. That chalice, which was designed for a significant other's ordination in the mid-90s, is made out of solid rock. It's the heaviest chalice I've ever had to move around, but the fact that it's rock and the fact that it's a chalice shape. Kabbalah, for example, sees earth as being the receptacle for all the other energies up above it being drawn in there. So it's a little hard to see here, but if you could see the tree would also have a little bit more light on it, you'd be able to see that all those energies, the bottom three things, are all focused on Malkuth, what Kabbalah calls Malkuth is basically the physical world. What I do here too is I'm using a scrying ball that's made out of, well, probably either ebony or or obsidian, and it's surrounded by a special ankh. So it fits in the center of a special ankh, an ankh that was given to me by an angel named, not an angel, he's actually a god of ancient Egypt called Thoth. Told me how to deal with the design, so we've got that in there. And it sits in the center of that. Let's make sure we got here. I use a round black ball that may be obsidian or jet. The ball is prepared by clearing with holy water, after which it is run through the smoke of incense and anointed with an oil blend called Revealed Truth. The ball is placed inside the hoop of an ankh, whose design was given to me by the god Thoth. Thoth is well known for ruling Mercury and communications, and many believe analogous to the Greek god Hermes. When I first started the practice that led to the scrying procedure I use, I just started to open up to whatever would show up. That is very similar to a method used by Dr. Carl Jung called active imagination. What I found was a night scene and a mound city that reminded one of the Lord of the Rings type Shire. One of the mounds had a set of steps going down to a landing. Through the door was another set of steps that led to a temple. I met the ruler of the realm, who it was indicated to me it was Uriel. During that and several subsequent visits, he gave me new insights into other practices I was engaged in and some new symbols to be used in those efforts. When you have a good connection with the spirit realm, they will tailor the message to you, and so you get something relevant to you. If I were to get messages in advanced physics terms, they would be meaningless. But give me ideas on how to improve an endangered ocean creature support work I do, they become very helpful. Next slide, please. There we go. Since I took these pictures, I got a new camera. So the next time around here, we'll do this. We're going to talk about another type thing called evocation, which is similar but not the same as. Although it does not use any scrying type device as such, there is another well-known practice in occult circles to produce a visionary contact. It is a procedure called evocation, often called evocation to visible appearance. That gives the impression that you can see the spirit out in front of you in the same way you see the person sitting next to you. In very rare instances that an image might appear to you with your eyes open, it is still a vision. You'd go put your finger through it and there wouldn't be anything there. What evocation does tend to do is give you a very strong image on your inner mind screen, but it's a very focused, strong image. The triangle is the core symbol here. We need to create a magic energy circle around our place of working. In the Middle Ages, many felt that no real angel would sully his hands with our realm. So you have to call on demons. And because demons can't be trusted, the triangle must be placed outside the circle, and you didn't dare leave the circle until a demon's been banished. I can assure you, having evoked hundreds of angels, that the need for demons is just not true. Anything you can get with the help of a demon, you can get more safely from an angel. I use a symbolic structure as a plan for where to place the triangle. Elemental order placed on the four directions is a simple way to set up a temple plan. Air is associated with the east. With a more elaborate temple layout, say for the planets or zodiac, I might place Aries in the east and work from that to find a good symbolic spot for the triangle for a planetary or zodiacal spirit. What we've done here, this is definitely an Aries triangle. There's an angel called Amamaya. And what I do, I have worked with a plan where I basically set up an astrological chart for my space of working and place the triangle where the Aries is going to be, because Amamaya is a seriously top-notch angel. So, and I say that we'll have better pictures next time. From that point on, you would focus on a whole series of things called correspondences, which are mentioned earlier on the triangle. These would include a proper color, incense made of plants that have been associated with a particular energy, and poetry designed to call forth the vibe of the energy associated with a particular element, planet, or sign. There are special design names associated with each of these, which are, of course, used. So I would be calling on, with Amamaya, I would be making sure that the first thing I did was call on a name of deity that is associated with Aries. And in this case, it's Yod-He-Vav-He. It's one of the correspondences of the 12 signs each get a version of Yod-He-Vav-He to use in the start. Since Aries is the first sign, it gets the straight Yod-He-Vav-He. And there's an archangel who rules all the angels of Aries are ruled by an archangel named Malkidiel. And Malkidiel rules over the angel Amamaya, who's part of this group called the Shema Mephiresh, of which there are 6 of them per sign. So it gives you a lot to work with. Skrying is a relatively passive process. If you want to contact a specific angel, naturally you need to do an invocation, and that includes all this stuff. It includes smell, it includes the poetry that has the right energy about it. Then relax and see what comes. With evocation, you are more actively working at creating an energy environment around the triangle that will open a spiritual doorway that will manifest the entity you're hoping to contact. One thing that both these have in common is that the period of time for which you are practicing them, you withdraw from the outer world. Only by separating yourself from the outer world, only from separating yourself from the outer world, and refocusing on the inner, can you set up a space where a doorway to all the potential resources can be found. These resources can change your life in positive ways. If things aren't working for you, you can find guidance and energy for making needed change. As you may have noticed, some of these practices are directly focused on you, like the psychomantium. Others are open you up to a larger range of energies, like scrying with a focus on opening to more general energy, like say a planet or a sign. One of the practices that is visionary and both simple and very effective was developed by Dr. Carl Jung. It is mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, is called active imagination. Jung used active imagination as part of his psychoanalytic practice. This, in its simplest form, is opening yourself to an image that occurs when you quiet your mind and ask for an image to come forth. Often, some symbolic image relating to that energy is most active in your unconscious, and that may very well manifest. This, when properly understood, can aid one in the best way to come to terms with whatever issue is in your life this represents. What Jung refers to as the unconscious is actually a huge dynamic energy system that exists behind what you can see. This shares much with the spirit realm, and may be just another aspect of it. For most folks, it is unconscious, but understanding how to best manage the energy system, what that energy system wants from you, can really help your quality of life. Jung was quite successful in using this to track down the root of patient problems. Like our initial example of air, the energy of the unconscious is not seen but can have a very dramatic effect. The place you're most often going to come into direct contact with this is in the dream state. Although moods, curious sensations, and bodily affects can also be signs we should stop and figure out what's bugging us, what inside is bugging us. It really helps to have some professional guidance in interpreting and using the information gained to maximum benefit. However, if you'd like to try and see how it feels, there's a really good how-to book called Inner Work, written by a guy named Dr. Robert Johnson. The book has exact details on how to do active imagination and dream work both, and is written in a really easy to understand form. In totality, most people's lives are conditioned by the cultures we are born into. The genetic heritage of our biologic families and the time we are in historically. Tapping into the inner resources, these practices give you access and can give you a special kind of support for going beyond the limitations your outer life has imposed. You can find true freedom and a better sense of purpose. Here are some considerations. This approach to spirituality is a path, not a destination. You are digging out from under a load of cultural dirt, and that takes time. So success comes with patient persistence. It's a skill that takes time to develop. As you go along, personal insights will help you see how you are being influenced by things that aren't really you. And this process of extracting you from everybody else is what Jung called individuation. Separating the you from others have told you you are and you need to be is crucial for finding your true authentic self. There is an old saying that the more you put into something, the more you'll get out of it. Having a consistent practice is very important. If you can use the practice you have chosen at a minimum once or twice a week, this will really improve your chances of success and your speed of getting there. More advice would be that you always want to get to the truth and be on guard for deception. There's an old saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And that is very applicable here. Self-deception is always there to be watched out for. I had to train myself to use a thing I call a BS meter. This is when this is activated, I start to get an uncomfortable feeling when something just isn't right. And certainly if something is too extreme, you know, you're gonna win the lottery tomorrow or something like that, I wouldn't believe it. Anyway, finally, don't jump to conclusions. As an old saying, the proof is in the pudding. Giving things that you may be told a chance to work out for themselves takes time. That means, and this is very important, for a practitioner to keep good records. Then you can go back weeks and months later and see what you were told in a previous interaction. Memories get faulty over time. I'm always going back to log notes of angel interactions and finding some detail I forgot. Some of these details can add significantly to the effectiveness of the ongoing work with the angel you're contacting. What's success look like? Well, give you an example of my life. I've got a really great wife. And in 1996, the lady for whom that chalice you saw on the previous slide was made, had a really bad case of hepatitis C. She died from it. And so suddenly, you know, I no longer had a relationship, and it was a pretty rough time. And I was constantly calling on the angels, and I highly recommend an angel of Venus called Monachiel if you're looking for something like that. It took 3 years, but the right person showed up. So it was it was amazing how I used to say, I think they must have getting tired of hearing me gripe. So, you know, all of us need to, you know, have things we need and want in our lives. And that was one of the things at the time, and 22 years later, here we are. So anyway, sometimes angels often change shapes in how they appear to you. This is something else here really important. Just because it doesn't look like it happened like the one you saw last time doesn't mean it's not the same one. As long as the image you get has qualities appropriate to the sphere they are connected with, you're probably fine. For example, an angel of the solar powers is likely to be male and have some orange in whatever kind of garb he has. An angel of the moon is more likely to be female and have some blue in the image you are shown. These things aren't absolutely written in stone. Thoth was a moon god years and years and years ago because he was associated with time and being able to keep time, and the moon was the way people kept time back then. It was every month the moon was going through its cycle, so, you know, but in general you certainly can use these as being as rules. Sometimes they will want you to travel to a location with them in vision. Any image or environment you go to is as much a part of the message as the word you hear or the image the spirit has. It takes time, but you can ferret a meaning out of this, and time and experience will help you understand the nuances of the whole message. Every piece that you see is part of the message, whether or not you're hearing it in your head or not. It's added information. There may be some reason why you were out in, you know, suddenly finding yourself out with this angel out in the middle of a desert someplace. And like one of the places, one angel of Taurus used to take me to had a vision of something that looked very much like Ayers Rock, Uluru in Australia in the background. And of course, Taurus's color is red-orange, and Uluru, depending on how the sun's hitting it, can be red-orange also. As long as there have been people, there have been self-styled prophets. With pumped-up hype and smug self-confidence, they are glad to tell you what God thinks. These messages often come with a dark side of manipulation. They tell you, mine is the only true message, and the only way you can be safe is to follow me. Using fear and guilt, untold thousands have been sucked into their orbits, sometimes with disastrous consequences. Just remember Jonestown. What I'm offering here is a model for self-discovery, where you can find out what is truly helpful to you at your present state of spiritual development. Used with skill, This inner planes connection will give you a leg up in what you need to access for understanding your personal truth. And with practice, you can truly be the best prophet, yourself. Thank you. All right. So I'm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Fire away. Yes.
When you have that Kabbalah image, were those clocks?
Were those what?
Clocks.
Clocks?
Go back on your slides.
First. There we go. No.
No, keep going. I know what that is. Keep going. No, next slide.
Next slide, please.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Next slide. Does that say 4 o'clock?
Does that say what?
That is a clock. Or does it say 12:20 or 4 o'clock? What does that say? See all the clocks on the Kabbalah, on the...
No. That is showing you that. Let me explain this to you. It is the flaming sword.
Oh,
and basically, it's a symbol of how the energy runs from Sephira to Sephira.
It does look a little bit like a clock, though.
It says 4 o'clock, so that's the 4 elements. That's what 4 means.
No. It basically takes it follows the energy. There are two patterns on this thing, this big tree here. You've got the flaming sword and you've got the serpent of wisdom. And the serpent of wisdom follows the paths through the tree. And
Yes, I know about that. But it just from back here, it looks like a nice
Well.
white-faced clock that says 4 o'clock.
a friend of mine named Neil Hevel made a big painting and then got a bunch of posters made from that painting. And this was the largest size. So I'm proud to have it in my temple because I do a lot with the angels of the tree. Specifically, my thing has been in the last few years has been the Shem HaMephoresh. Now they are a group of 72 angels that are associated with the zodiac. There are 6 angels per sign. There are 12 signs. So here we got your 72, and it's taken me way too long to go into a lot of detail, but I find them very helpful. Anybody else? Yes.
So, have you been able to contact your own personal holy guardian angel?
What about my contacts?
Have you been able to contact your own personal holy guardian angel?
I really believe that first contact I had, I was talking about, the drug-induced contact, that was my holy guardian angel.
The one who said don't come back?
Yeah. And there was one other time in my life that I started. A friend of mine wrote a thing called a ritual to invoke your holy guardian angel into yourself. And I did that like day after day after day back about 30 years ago. And I started getting messages. And again, they shared the same quality as that first message in that they were very soft but very profound. You could just tell there was somebody, whatever it was, knew what they were talking about. And they were really also, there was no explanation. They'd make like a 1-sentence thing and then it'd disappear. And the next night I'd do it again, and then, well, after time, life intervenes in one's practices, and I stopped doing it and lost the contact. So, but it's there, potentially, Anybody else? Well, I guess that's that. I thank you guys, everybody very much for listening to this, and we'll see where this goes.